Mr. President, after holding 20 town hall meetings in my home state of Oregon over the past month, I can certainly report that people are hungry for good economic news, particularly news about job creation, growing our economy. Our people want fresh ideas that work, and clearly they are saying passionately that it's time to set aside government that doesn't work for them. That is why I'm proud to come to the floor this afternoon and talk about a positive economic development, a development that has far exceeded the projections and the hopes of those who advocated for it, and that is the Build America Bonds program. Build America Bonds work, and they work because they put our people to work at good-paying, family-wage jobs. Mr. President, when I started working on Build America Bonds about 6 years ago with a number of colleagues on the other side of the aisle, it was because I felt there was bipartisan support for shoring up our nation's crumbling infrastructure and at the same time getting our economy back to work. It's a fact that investing in infrastructure, dollar for dollar, is one of the best economic multipliers we have in our country, and it's a way to jumpstart economic growth. As communities deal with the recession, I and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle wanted to give our communities new tools to finance essential construction projects. What Build America Bonds has always been about is not taking any of the tools out of the toolbox we have today, but putting some additional ones in there for our communities. Build America Bonds is certainly not a replacement for direct federal spending on infrastructure. But I think all people who've looked at this subject understand that the need is so great for roads and bridges and water systems and schools that we ought to be looking for all cost-effective, efficient ways to fund this essential infrastructure that does have bipartisan support in the United States Senate. Now, to report, Mr. President, we thought that maybe getting the Build America Bonds program off the ground would result in somewhere in the vicinity of $5 to $10 billion worth of additional investment in infrastructure. The program was authorized as part of the stimulus legislation. It didn't really get off the ground until the middle of the next year, and I and my colleagues thought that perhaps if $5 to $10 billion of Build America Bonds were authorized, that would allow us to make the case that when the program expires at the end of this year, we could call for its renewal. Mr. President, when the year wrapped up, the figures showed that almost $64 billion worth of Build America Bonds had been issued. In fact, a number of independent experts say that Build America Bonds are now the hottest, most attractive vehicle in the municipal bond market. In my home state of Oregon, it's been proven time and time again that private money follows public investment. People get back to work building a bridge, for example, and all the businesses near the construction site get more activity from the people who need their services. Once the project is finished, private investment follows the public investment. That bridge makes it easier for folks to get to work or take their kids to school, and communities grow. So as I mentioned, this bill has a long bipartisan lineage. Then Senator Talent joined with me about 6 years ago for this program. The program would have created a federal tax credit bonding program to fund investment in transportation infrastructure. Since then, our colleague, Senator Thune, and 4 others on both sides of the aisle have joined us to make sure that the Senate was on record as saying we can find sensible, common sense, nonpartisan solutions that address the basic needs that this country has to a great extent overlooked. I particularly appreciate what a number of my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee have done in this area, particularly Senator Murray, who has championed our cause in the Pacific Northwest with respect to infrastructure, Senator Harkin, the chairman of the Pensions and Labor Committee, also done a great job in school construction. I want it understood that those of us who support Build America bonds see the bonds as a complement to the outstanding work that a number of my colleagues who I've mentioned are doing. This is not to supplant the kind of direct spending efforts, but to shore it up, to offer additional assistance, particularly additional assistance when the need is so great. So as our proposal was developed, we had an opportunity to work with Chairman Baucus and Senator Grassley, the chair and the ranking minority member on the Finance Committee, because we wanted to make sure that this effort continued to be bipartisan at every step of the way. And I'm very grateful that Chairman Baucus and Senator Grassley, in effect, gave us a chance to jumpstart this idea, to get it off the ground. The reality is, I suggest to my colleague from Delaware, the federal government has never bonded in the transportation area. A lot of states and communities wonder if they'd even exist without bonds, but the federal government had never bonded in the transportation area, and we felt, our bipartisan coalition, that a tax credit bond could be especially effective. But because Chairman Baucus and Senator Grassley were willing to bet on our bipartisan coalition, our coalition that said Build America bonds are going to be an efficient tool, we saw all the predictions for the success of this program exceeded. Recently, a joint CBO, Joint Tax Committee report, highlighted a number of other benefits from Build America bonds. CBO and the Joint Tax Committee found that tax credit bonds, like our Build America bonds, are more cost-effective than tax-exempt bonds. The report also concludes that because the bonds are more attractive to investors, they are more efficient at raising capital. This saves municipalities time and money and effort that can be spent on other priorities. Aside from the fact that the funds are raised efficiently, what I heard again and again, and I think this is what colleagues are going to be looking at when it comes to infrastructure investment, Build America bonds get the job done quickly. Because they have to adhere to federal spending guidelines, all of the bond funds have to be spent within 2 years of the date the bond is issued. This means that money isn't just flowing into projects. It's being spent in the short term, paying to build roads and bridges and other infrastructure, and putting folks back to work quickly. That's the kind of bang for our buck that Americans are hungry for right now. That's what Build America bonds deliver. The private sector, folks who represent the country's largest, businesses, Chamber of Commerce and National Association of Manufacturers, have been strong supporters of it. Many of the labor groups, the trades in particular, have been supportive of it because clearly business and working families need a working infrastructure to give businesses the security they need to think long-term about their future. By any scenario you look at with respect to this program, this is one that helps local governments, local businesses, and the people who rely on infrastructure for jobs and economic security. My view is, Mr. President, that's exactly the kind of solution folks are asking for from the Congress at this time. It's fine to speculate about programs that you'd like to have considered and you'll look at down the road to see if they actually produce. The Obama administration now wants to make Build America bonds permanent because they have seen the extraordinary response that our country is demonstrating all across the country. Build America bonds have produced, and they have produced exactly what was intended: a prompt infrastructure investment in an efficient fashion. I want to express my appreciation to Chairman Baucus. Under his leadership, the Senate Finance Committee, on which I'm honored to serve, is currently looking at expanding and improving Build America bonds in the upcoming jobs bill. What we know is we've got something that is working, that is making a difference in this critical infrastructure area, and that literally has 6 years worth of bipartisan history where Democrats and Republicans have come together to team up on an issue that is extraordinarily important to our nation. If we keep working together on good ideas like Build America bonds, by the time the current economic storm passes, our country's infrastructure will be finally ready to support a strong, healthy economy that lies ahead for our nation.